I still train for speed. And for the years now, my favorite stuff has been to sprint, jump, but also do speed, squat, dead, and bench. Obviously depending on if I'm training upper or lower body. And my favorite way to do that is with bands. And a lot of people always ask, it's kind of a joke amongst people who know me how often I use bands, but I'll use them for different reasons. And when I'm doing it for speed, I like to do band resistance. And the reason for that is basically you can accelerate through the movement instead of having to slow down as you get close to the end of the movement because you have to stop your momentum or you'll jump or you'll throw the bar. Because as you go through the movement, the band gets stretched more and more and it gets tighter and tighter. And it gets to a point where if the band is tight enough, like it really won't go any further. And so as I'm pressing, I can get to that point where I basically hit a brick wall. And so my intention can be to move the weight as fast as I possibly can, all the way to the end of the movement. And that's basically how you train for speed. It's got to have that intention. I'm going to move this weight as fast as I possibly can. And so I can use chains to do that as well, because as the chains come off the ground, there's more and more weight added. So it gets heavier as you go. I do think that the bands are better because it's not just with the chains, it's with each chain link that comes off the ground, it's the same amount of increase as you go throughout the movement. But with the bands, as you get closer to the end, it's the increase in resistance is getting more and more, the rate of increase. And so it really stops you as you're trying to accelerate through the movement. I also do reverse bands, but that's a whole different ball game.
So, well, how do you work that into your training then? Is it you have a whole speed day? Do you just do like one speed exercise to start every lift? Is it how do you
So
structure?
like there's I'll do something to kind of fire up the neuro the CNS, central nervous system, something where even on a heavy day or on a hypertrophy day, like I want to do something to get the nervous system going. So that might just be like a med ball toss, um, or like a couple jumps, or like a chest med ball throw, something that's explosive, but it's not training the speed super hard. But I will have dedicated days, depending on what my split is, where at least a good chunk of the workout is dedicated to speed training. So for a lower body day, I usually like say for example, my favorite split is the conjugate west side barbell method where I have a dynamic day. And on that, the other day is the max effort. That's my heavy day. On the dynamic day, I will train hypertrophy eventually, but I start out with the speed. And so I may start with sprints or jumps and then move to either speed deadlifts or speed squats where I have that band resistance. Um, and that's lower rep. It's like usually 3 reps, I would say, definitely under six or under. And it depends how I'm feeling. I usually go like more than any other exercise or adaptation I'm training for speed. I go based on how I'm feeling. If I feel like I'm moving that weight fast, then I keep going. And you can even measure how fast you're moving the bar. But even just feeling if you're moving it fast, I keep going with the sets up till about 10 sets. And but if I feel like I'm slowing down at like set 6, I just call it right there. And that's enough for the day.
Is like it is important in the sense that like you lose those that
Yeah.
explosiveness. Actually, fat people always talk about losing muscle mass, but like you actually you actually lose your you know your power and speed, your muscle explosiveness before anything, before
Yeah.
strength, before muscle mass. And those things go much slower. The speed goes the fastest. So I do think that there's a place for like for everybody to train it a little bit. Obviously, if you're not using it in a performance way, I don't think it needs to be like central to your training. But to throw in something once in a while, even if it's just some sprints or some like box jumps or something once a week, I definitely think is worth throwing in there just to maintain it as much as possible.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of benefits that are hard to state. Like you talk about doing box jump and you think, well, I don't need to jump super high, so I'm not going to keep doing this. But it's training, that explosion, but there's some stability there. And even landing on the box, there's going to be some force absorption. And then there's also the fact that I do think, like, I'll never forget when I was talking to Dustin, who was the strength coach for the 49ers, for those that don't know. And we were introducing some sprinting into my program that I hadn't done for a while. I think it was in the middle of the pandemic. And he was like, that'll be good for keeping that size on because you're training the type 2 muscle fibers, which are actually the bigger muscle fibers. And we don't know exactly how that works with hypertrophy, but training some explosiveness, some power doesn't have to be true speed training. You don't have to be sprinting for 40 yards or anything like that. But doing some of that athletic movement and that power movement is good for everyone, I think, and for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, just because you say, "Oh, I don't need to jump or sprint in my everyday life," it's like, well, you don't really need to put weight on your back and squats either in your everyday life, but you do it for the training adaptation. So